Right now, in the middle of one of the largest funerals Iran has staged in decades, there is a man who is supposed to be the most powerful person in the entire country, and nobody can prove he's actually alive. Not one photograph, not one video, not one recording of his voice. 4 months after he was declared supreme leader of Iran, the man now sitting at the top of the Islamic Republic has never been seen or heard by a single person outside his own inner circle. And today, at the one event that should have brought him out into the open, his own father's funeral, he is nowhere to be found. Stay with this, because by the end, you'll understand why so many people, inside and outside Iran, are now asking the same uncomfortable question. Is Mojtaba Khamenei actually running this country, or is he already gone, and the regime simply hasn't told anyone yet? To understand how strange this moment really is, you have to go back to how it all started. In late February of 2026, Israel and the United States launched a coordinated strike against Iran's top leadership, hitting multiple high-value targets in a single night. One of those targets was the private residence of Ali Khamenei, the man who had ruled Iran as supreme leader for more than 3 decades. The strike hit his compound directly. Within days, Iranian state media confirmed what had already leaked out through intelligence channels and foreign reporting. Khamenei was dead. His wife, also present in the compound, was killed in the same strike. It was, by any measure, one of the most significant single moments in the entire modern history of the Islamic Republic, the sudden, violent removal of the man who had defined Iran's government since 1989. But that was only the first part of the story, because in that same strike, another member of the Khamenei family was caught in the blast, Ali Khamenei's son, Mojtaba. For a brief period afterward, there was genuine confusion inside Iran and among foreign intelligence agencies about whether Mojtaba had survived at all. Then, days later, Iranian officials announced that he had, in fact, lived through the attack, though he had suffered serious injuries. According to multiple reports citing people familiar with his condition, those injuries included burns and wounds serious enough to require several surgeries. And then something happened that, looking back now, set the tone for everything that followed. Rather than stepping forward publicly to reassure a shaken nation, Mojtaba Khamenei disappeared from view entirely. In early March, as Iran scrambled to fill the sudden vacuum at the top of its government, a formal process began to select a new supreme leader. Under Iran's constitution, this decision technically belongs to a body called the Assembly of Experts, a council of senior clerics tasked with reviewing candidates in secrecy. But according to multiple reports from Iranian opposition media and international outlets, that process didn't unfold the way it was designed to. Instead, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC, the military and paramilitary organization that has steadily expanded its grip on Iranian power for years, moved almost immediately to push Mojtaba into the role. Reporting citing sources close to the assembly described a campaign of what was characterized as repeated contact, and both psychological and political pressure applied to assembly members in the days before the vote. Some members reportedly pushed back hard enough that they threatened to boycott the online session altogether. In the end, the pressure won out. On March 9th, Mojtaba Khamenei was formally announced as the third supreme leader in the history of the Islamic Republic. And this is where the story starts to turn into something much stranger than a simple succession. Because from the very moment his appointment was announced, Mojtaba Khamenei did something no modern Iranian leader has ever done. He vanished. No inauguration speech, no televised address, no public appearance of any kind. 4 days after being named the most powerful man in the country, a written statement was released in his name, promising revenge for what officials called the martyrs of the war. It contained no video, no audio, just text, distributed through state media, with no way for anyone outside the regime's inner circle to confirm it had actually come from him. That pattern has not changed since. Every single communication attributed to Mojtaba Khamenei from that day to this one has come the exact same way. Written words released by people loyal to him, with his name attached, and absolutely nothing else. Think about how unusual that actually is. This is a country of more than 80 million people. Its new leader is supposedly directing the government, negotiating with foreign powers, managing a war-shattered military, and shaping how Iran responds to some of the most serious threats it has faced in generations. And in 4 full months, the population he supposedly leads has not seen his face, heard his voice, or received a single unscripted moment of proof that he is actually the one making these decisions. Iranian officials have pushed back against the growing skepticism, insisting he has made a full recovery and is personally overseeing Tehran's negotiations with Washington. But insisting something is true and proving it are two very different things. And so far, the regime has offered nothing but insistence. This is the part most people watching from outside Iran have missed entirely, because it's easy to assume a government simply says its leader is fine and the story ends there. But inside Iran, and among the journalists and analysts who track the regime closely, the questions have only grown louder with time. And nothing has forced those questions into the open more than the events of the past several days, because Iran finally held the funeral for Ali Khamenei. And that funeral has become the exact moment where all of this uncertainty collided head-on with reality. The funeral itself is not a small affair. It's being staged across 5 separate cities in 2 different countries, running from July 4th through July 9th, stretching between Tehran, Qom, and Mashhad inside Iran, and extending into Najaf and Karbala across the border in Iraq. Iranian officials have described it as one of the largest logistical operations in the history of the Islamic Republic, mobilizing government workers, university staff, labor unions, firefighters, soldiers, and organized mourning groups to pull it off. Iran's president has publicly called on citizens to turn out in large numbers, explicitly framing the funeral as a chance to present a unified front to the rest of the world. Foreign dignitaries have arrived to take part, including Pakistan's prime minister and representatives sent by China and India. This is, by design, meant to be a show of strength, a message to Washington and to Jerusalem that, despite everything the regime has been through, it remains standing, organized, and defiant. But here's where the carefully staged image starts to crack. Because the entire justification for holding this funeral, the entire point of it, was to honor Ali Khamenei, and by extension, to give his son and successor a moment to step into the light. And the son is not there. As of the ceremonies held so far, no images, no video, and no confirmed reporting has placed Mojtaba Khamenei anywhere near his own father's funeral. Iran's most senior officials, cabinet ministers, military commanders, senior clerics, have all been seen walking past the caskets, paying their respects in full view of cameras and foreign press. The one person whose presence would matter more than anyone else's, the man who is supposed to be running the entire country, is simply absent. And this is exactly the kind of detail that changes how you read everything else. Because if this were an ordinary transition of power, if Mojtaba Khamenei were healthy, secure, and firmly in control the way officials claim, this funeral would be the single easiest, most obvious moment for him to step forward. It would cement his legitimacy at home. It would send a message of continuity and strength to Iran's enemies abroad. Instead, according to reporting, Iranian security officials reportedly blocked him from attending his own father's burial in Mashhad, citing fears that Israel could either assassinate him during the ceremony or use his public appearance to finally pinpoint his location. That explanation might sound reasonable on its surface, but it runs into an immediate problem. The same funeral he's supposedly too endangered to attend is packed with thousands of civilians, foreign officials, and Iran's entire senior leadership, all gathered in the exact same places, at the exact same times, under the exact same risk. If the danger were truly that severe, you'd expect the whole event to be scaled back or hidden. Instead, it's been turned into one of the largest public gatherings Iran has held in years, precisely because a crowd of that size makes any military strike against the venue almost politically and morally impossible. In other words, the very setting that was supposedly too dangerous for Mojtaba to enter is, by its size and composition, one of the safest places in the entire country. So why is the one person that setting was built to protect the only major figure not standing inside it? That contradiction is exactly why so much attention has now turned toward Iran's most powerful military body, the IRGC. Throughout this entire war and its aftermath, the Guard has steadily consolidated influence over the machinery of the state, and it was the IRGC, according to multiple reports, that pushed hardest to install Mojtaba as supreme leader in the first place, even while some members of the Assembly of Experts resisted. If Mojtaba is alive, wounded, and recovering somewhere in hiding, then the arrangement works perfectly well for the Guard. They get a legitimate face at the top of the government, a name that carries the weight of the Khamenei family, while the actual decisions get made by the people around him. But if Mojtaba did not survive his injuries, or is incapacitated far beyond what officials have admitted, the exact same arrangement still works for the Guard. A name and a title, attached to written statements that nobody can verify, is enough to keep the machinery of the state running without ever answering the one question that matters most. This is where the story shifts from simple confusion into something with much higher stakes, because it isn't just outside observers raising this question anymore. Israeli officials have taken it seriously enough to comment publicly. Israel's defense minister was reported this week as saying that Mojtaba Khamenei is, in his words, marked for death, a direct and public threat aimed at a man whose location, health, and even continued existence remain unconfirmed. Iran's own military responded with a sharp warning of its own, cautioning against what it called any miscalculation during the funeral period, vowing what officials described as a crushing and historic response to any attack. Layer that kind of open threat and counter threat on top of a leadership vacuum this deep, and you start to see why analysts are calling this one of the most unstable and dangerous stretches since the war first began. It's worth pausing here to walk through exactly what has and has not been confirmed, because the difference matters enormously. What has been confirmed through multiple independent reports is that Ali Khamenei was killed in the opening strikes of the war in late February. What has been confirmed is that his wife was killed in the same attack. What has been confirmed is that Mojtaba Khamenei was present during the strike and suffered injuries serious enough to require multiple surgeries. What has been confirmed is that since his appointment in March, every single communication attributed to him has come in written form only, with no video, no audio, and no independently verified citing. What has not been confirmed by anyone at any point over these 4 months is a single piece of direct evidence that Mojtaba Khamenei is alive today. Not one photograph taken after his appointment, not one recorded phone call, not one verified public appearance. That is the entire gap this story lives inside, and it's a gap the Iranian government has had 4 full months to close and has not. Officials have offered an explanation, of course, and on its face it's not unreasonable. They say he is directing the country's negotiations with Washington from a secure, undisclosed location, kept hidden specifically because Israel has both the intent and the demonstrated capability to strike Iranian leadership with terrifying precision, as the opening days of the war proved beyond any doubt. Given what happened to his own father, that kind of caution would make sense for any surviving leader trying to stay alive. But caution and total, unbroken invisibility are not the same thing. World leaders operating under serious, credible threats have still found secure ways to prove they're alive and in command, through verified video calls, through trusted intermediaries, through carefully controlled but still verifiable appearances. 4 months of pure silence, broken only by unverifiable written statements, is a much harder thing to explain away, purely as security precaution. And this is the deeper problem sitting underneath the entire Iranian system right now, because whether or not Mojtaba Khamenei is alive may, in a strange way, matter less than the fact that no one outside a small circle of regime insiders can actually answer that question. A government that can operate for months while the identity and status of its own supreme leader remains unverifiable is a government where accountability has effectively disappeared. If every major decision, every statement, every negotiating position can be issued in his name without any way to confirm his involvement, then real power isn't sitting with an elected or appointed leader at all. It's sitting with whichever officials control the flow of those statements, and right now all the available reporting points toward the IRGC as the body with the most to gain from exactly this kind of ambiguity. Consider what that arrangement would actually mean if it's true. A wounded, possibly incapacitated, possibly deceased figurehead kept in official existence purely through paperwork and press releases, while the actual military and political decisions of one of the most heavily armed, most geopolitically volatile countries on Earth are being made by a security apparatus that answers to no elected body and faces no public scrutiny. That is not a stable transfer of power. That is a black box sitting at the center of a nuclear-capable, war-torn regime at the exact moment tensions with 2 of the most powerful militaries in the world remain at their highest point in years. And the timing of all of this could not be more pointed. Khamenei's body is scheduled to lie in state on the same day that marks 250 years of American independence, a coincidence Iranian officials have not shied away from, given how deliberately they've built the funeral's symbolism around defiance toward Washington. Another major date within the procession lines up with a significant religious commemoration tied to Shia history, another layer of meaning clearly chosen to reinforce the regime's messaging of continuity, resilience, and resistance. Every piece of this funeral, from the cities chosen to the exact date selected, appears engineered to project strength to both a domestic audience exhausted by war and economic hardship, and an international audience watching closely for any sign of internal collapse. But strength that has to be this carefully staged is, by definition, fragile. Reporting from inside Tehran in the days leading up to the funeral paints a picture that doesn't match the image the regime is trying to project. Fuel shortages have left residents waiting in lines for hours just to fill a tank. Some residents told reporters they hadn't been able to get gasoline for days. Others admitted plainly that despite the government's calls for mass turnout, many ordinary Iranians were choosing to leave the city for a break rather than attend the ceremonies at all. That's an extraordinary admission for a government trying to sell a narrative of national unity and unshakable resolve. If the population itself is quietly opting out of the very spectacle designed to rally it, the gap between the regime's messaging and the country's actual mood may be even wider than the gap between what officials claim about their new leader and what they can actually prove. So where does that leave the central question this entire story is built around? Is Mojtaba Khamenei alive? The honest answer, based on everything that has been reported and confirmed so far, is that nobody outside a very small circle inside the Iranian government can say for certain. What can be said is this: the amount of verified evidence supporting his continued existence after 4 full months in the most powerful position in the country is effectively zero. No photograph, no video, no voice recording, no independently confirmed citing by any foreign official, journalist, or intelligence service. Every single piece of information the public has received has arrived filtered through the exact institutions that benefit most from keeping the ambiguity alive. That doesn't prove he's dead. It's entirely possible he is alive, severely injured, and being kept out of public view purely out of legitimate fear of assassination, given what happened to his father in the opening moments of this war. If that's the case, then the coming days of this funeral may turn out to be the moment he finally steps forward, using the sheer scale and civilian presence at these ceremonies as cover to make his first public appearance since the war began. If he does emerge, even briefly, it will instantly answer a question that has hung over Iran's government for 4 months. But if the funeral ends, the mourning period concludes, and the world's most anticipated public appearance in Iranian politics still hasn't happened, that silence will speak louder than any written statement ever could. Because here's the deeper truth sitting at the center of everything you've just heard. Iran didn't just lose its supreme leader in a single devastating airstrike back in February. It lost the certainty that comes with knowing who is actually making decisions on behalf of 80 million people. Whatever else happens in the days ahead, whether Mojtaba Khamenei walks out in front of the cameras at his father's funeral or remains exactly as invisible as he has been since the day he was appointed, one fact will remain true regardless. For 4 months, one of the most consequential governments on the planet has been run, at least in name, by a man the outside world has never once seen or heard. And until that changes, every statement issued in his name, every threat, every promise of retaliation, every claim about the direction of a nation still recovering from war, carries an asterisk that cannot be ignored. Nobody can prove the man signing his name to Iran's future is actually the one holding the pen.